if all these MISs are either going to buy or they're going to create their own. So in some cases they created their own. Some cases, they're like Aris, they bought some. Do you see then that if you were a Schoolcom stroke parent pay company, do you see a future for that sort of type of company?
It's interesting because I think there is a future for that organisation, but I think anything like that where they are still specialists in their own right don't necessarily have such a future if that's only what they're doing. It's a conversation I remember having a few months ago with David, funnily enough, and also Andrew over at Parent Pay, and they were talking a lot about kind of we was all talking about kind of the future of the marketplace and whatnot. And Parent Pay are very much looking into Europe as well. They've been doing a lot of work in Europe and whatnot, and that's fantastic. So they're already seeing this future that they can't just stick to payments within the UK. Parent Pay, of course, as well also has Nimble under their roof. So one area that I think payments, and I did a lot of research on this over the last kind of year or so. In fact, when I was at Group Call, we were actually looking at see if this was a possibility of entering into this market, which was the whole Go Henry sort of side of things, which Nimble is the equivalent of, which is prepaid cards for young children, children and young adults, so that they can buy things in shops outside of the school gates. There was a statistic at this chat that, and I really hope I get the facts right on this, but Andrew was saying at Parent Pay that the total addressable market within schools. So this is how much money, according to their research, they believe can go through the school from parents and other sources into schools. So all the money that Parent Pay, for example, transacts and all the other competitors. And the upper limit of that, I believe the number was 5 billion. 5 billion, okay, and at the time Parent Pay, and probably has gone up since then, had about 1.9 billion of that. So all the money for all the schools that was moving, they transacted just about 40% of all of that money. So it's a huge thing. But that's an upper limit. Even if Parent Pay was to get to that, or anybody else was to get to the upper limit, that's your absolute ceiling of money that can be transacted. And of course, they then take the 1% transaction fee or whatever it is that they take from all of that. So they got to go in other directions. And so with Nimble, where they are now looking outside of the school gates to do something extra, to do something more, I was incredibly interested in this, and I've had a couple of conversations with the people at Go Henry as well, over the past, and I'm really fascinated on that market because it's new, and it's really, it's really accessible for anybody that's in that market space. So Parent Pay, and other payment organisations do absolutely have to look over their shoulder, but they do have the capabilities to enter other market spaces, into the commercial market spaces, even in things like loyalty cards and anything else like that, whereby they're controlling that flow of money. It's not just from one card to one shop. Actually, it's going to single central organisations, schools, shops, clubs, things like that. And so that's absolutely a direction that they can go, and they can continue to grow in that space. It's still similar to the way that challenger banks like Monzo, Starling, Tide, people like that are continuing to grow at such an incredible pace against the Barclays and Nationwides and RBS and people like that. So there is still a market for them. Having said that, they would be a fantastic prize for somebody to buy. They really would. They, tying up that area of that market in one foul swoop, it'd be brilliant.
I agree. I think it's interesting because I think they basically will need to pivot, one way or another, and they might even have to get to the point where they disrupt their own market, based on making sure that they survive. Let's face it, Monza and all those different companies, what they've done is disrupted and basically changed the way that banking is done, especially even for businesses. It's amazing, in fact, actually what they've achieved, I think.
But the thing is with payments, and I've worked for payments for about 4 years now, different organisations in the education sector, and the innovation in that very, very tight area of getting money from parents into schools, it's very difficult to come by because there's only so many different ways you can pay for things. Money on credit, debit, Apple Pay and Android Pay is probably the most recent, innovations that people can do, even in the schools market. And so, what new things are there? What new things are there to tease schools or customers to come to you over what they've already got, or over the competition? And it always comes down to that. There's so many ways you can pay for things. There's only so many things that you can pay for these days within schools. It's trips, it's cashless catering and dinners, it's school uniforms, it's maybe a few other bits and pieces. An interesting area is kind of where schools are kind of hiring out their facilities, school lettings and things like that. Is a relatively new form, but it's small fry still when compared to the number that the amount that goes through. So when you look at that, the tech could be easier. Yes, the tech could be newer, cloud-based, things like that. Yes, and most of them are. So then it's down to, well, how cheaply can you do it? They're all fighting to say who can have the smallest transaction fees. Guys at School Money over at Community Brands, what used to be EduSpot, they had a really interesting, and still do have a really interesting kind of setup in that they do an all-you-can-eat model, which nobody else, as far as I've ever seen, ever does that. And that's really interesting because it's a one flat fee. You don't charge transaction fees. Now, when you look into the details of it, that really does suit your bigger secondary school type areas where they put in lots of transactions. It's not cost effective, for example, for a small primary school. But again, that was really, really disruptive for the market, and I believe is still very, very attractive as well to the marketplace in doing that one fixed cost.
Yeah.
So again, it's how do they innovate? How do payment systems do something new? And as I say, there's this Go Henry type model, which I really, really love, and I think there's really good things there to do with for those organisations. There's also greater links with other organisations as well. So there's a lot of partnerships happening with the likes of cashless caterers, yes, but caterers, so people like Sodexo, Caterlink, people like that. These are people, for any viewers that don't really know too much about how they operate, they are contracted into schools to run the school kitchens. So they will be the chefs, the dinner ladies, everybody else like that, rather than the school hiring themselves. Tend to be cheaper to do it that way as well. And what happens is those organisations will bring with them the parent pays and whoever else in this world with them, and insist that the school typically puts those in place if they've not got them already. And so these deals are being done, and so without having to think about it, these organizations are selling their payment systems without them having to lift a finger. And so these deals with these sorts of systems are happening as they become more and more popular. And so that's again another area of kind of expansion or at least sales assistance that happens there as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So actually, the actually selling to the parents, in some ways, is probably maybe the next piece, or maybe is currently happening, as you say. But that means getting, working with publishers, maybe like Pearson, trying to and saying, do you know what? When they pay, let's go through our system, and we'll give you, half that percent or whatever it is. But actually working with all those other companies to get parents, because they've already got in front of parents, because they have an app which parents are using for the school. So actually getting in front of things like Pearson's and anybody else who's trying to sell directly to the parents for revision and so on.
Absolutely, and it's very interesting because I was talking to a friend of mine, and they're doing a little bit of work in India at the moment, or trying to launch some products in India. And very interestingly, the model in India, like a lot of countries around the world, is very, very different to here. The UK model is, education is largely free. There's not, apart from going on school trips, paying for meals and things like that, there's not a huge expectation for paying for education in the UK unless it's an independent school. Other schools, other areas around the world, very, very different story. In India in particular, there's a much greater reliance on parents paying for much more. And so again, in that model, absolutely, to be able to kind of target the parents for any sorts of or access to any sorts of systems, is much easier to kind of go at. In the UK, it's a different prospect, it's a different selling piece here, even for kind of the likes of Pearson's, the publishers, and whatnot. They've got a very it's a slightly bigger uphill battle, because as a parent myself, I know, well, I don't, apart from paying for my daughter's meals and she goes on a school trip, or paying £1 every term so she can dress up like a Victorian or whatever the latest thing is, it's all for free. So then turning around to me and saying, well, do I want to pay for her school books and things like that? It's not really. That's why I expect the school to be kind of providing. So in the UK, it is different, and it's a different prospect, it's a different avenue. But absolutely, the bottom line, there's only so much that can be sold to schools, and it's been done already. Schools have operated for so long, for hundreds of years, not thousands of years, but hundreds of years, in largely the same way. Education in the UK largely hasn't changed that much in so many years.
I agree.
That there's not much more that can be sold into schools, and so actually it does then need to start looking outside of the school gates to say where are there opportunities.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because actually, probably there are lots of providers to parents now who want parents' income, the revenue, I guess. If you look at it from a very bottom line perspective, but ultimately the services they're trying to deliver are probably, some of them are really strong, really well needed, and yet at the same time, as a parent, where do you go? Where do you trust? The one thing you do trust is schools. So if the school basically has a system that says, here's some recommended things that we've signed off and said, yeah, actually that's good material, then you're more likely to go, yeah, cool, I'll definitely pay for that. That supports my child, I'm definitely willing to pay for it. So
and the thing is where do we all trust when we're going to go and buy anything? Where do we all trust to go? I a lot of things that I buy are on Amazon usually. So actually, are these big providers of online services, your Amazons and your places like that, are they going to then stop providing sort of similar services, or is there going to be an Amazon equivalent for Edtech? For schools, not so much. We've done perfectly fine without something like that. Although we've got projects like Edtech Impact, Michael over there doing a fantastic job with that. But for parents, yeah, absolutely. As if I didn't work in the sector, if we didn't work in the sector, would we know what was a good payment system, or a good communicate? If I'm receiving communications off of X, Y, and Z, do I know that that's good, bad, or indifferent? No, I don't, because I don't know what systems are out there. And so that's something that will happen, not just with these payment systems, but any sort of system, is kind of much greater awareness for parents, because that's the next avenue for them to start earning income, is what can we sell to the parents. And even for older students in kind of college, do we sell to the students as well?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think colleges and universities, absolutely, there's a great opportunity there for some people. And you're right. In which case, ultimately, the parent pay sort of type of model can expand quite. There's a lot of areas to expand and lots of segments to approach, but they may need to do that. Yeah, that's interesting.
I think the only other interesting thing it will be is to see whether there are any new entrants into the payments market, because payments are unlike anything else. Everything else is rather niche. Payments is payments. Everybody pays largely the same way. I would be really interested to see if in the next sort of 2, 3, 4 years, whether any of those challenger banks look to the education market as well, because one of the things that they do have is not only money, but also they have a fair amount of brand awareness. Starling, Monzo, Tide, they're all on TV adverts. They're all appealing to kind of mass market consumers. And so what they have got is and teachers and head teachers are consumers, in their evening jobs as well. And so actually they'll be seeing all of these brands. And so if somebody like a Monzo suddenly comes along with a payment system for schools, they've got great brand awareness and attraction already, which any other entrant to the market has to start from scratch. So that would be interesting to see if they in a very slim, because they're very slim, very niche, very nimble organizations, they have the ability to kind of go at something new fairly cheaply. Be interesting to see if there's something that they want to attack as well.